Grifters, conmen, and bloodthirsty war hawks. Just some of the attacks levelled against Joe Biden's cabinet picks. The US president-elect this week announced his appointees for national security posts in his administration. They include Antony Blinken for Secretary of State, Avril Haines for National Intelligence Director, Jake Sullivan for National Security Advisor, and there are reports Biden will soon announce Michelle Flournoy as the next US Defense Secretary. Some commentators have denounced the decisions, saying the appointees have a history of taking horrid positions and money from companies benefiting from war.
Joe Biden is filling his cabinet with people directly from the military-industrial complex, pro-war mongers, people who have the worst records in the world.
Avril Haines, who, I mean, I saw this, the progressive left freaking out because apparently she wrote the legal rules on the Obama drone program. Tony Blinken, obviously, this I love, which is they're like, he generally agrees with the vice president, but he's broken with him on a few occasions, like bombing Libya. So It's like on the certain instances where Biden was correct, and he was like, no, we shouldn't do that. Tony Blinken was like, gotta disagree with the boss.
And he wanted to do like more arming of the rebels in Syria.
Well, I mean, even worse, I think he basically advocated for a full-scale invasion of Assad's regime, in 2013, which is insane.
Helping people get contracts to go murder other people en masse. These are the same people whose parents wouldn't allow them to have pets when they were children because they were afraid of what they would do to them.
Well, Derek Davison, editor of Foreign Exchanges, joins me. What do you make, Derek, of the national security team that Biden has assembled?
Well, I think that the dominant narrative that's emerging in the U.S. about this in the media has been it's sort of a return. They represent a return to normalcy. I agree with that in the sense that these are picks who are very reflective of the U.S. foreign policy establishment as it was sort of prior to Donald Trump. I disagree as to whether or not that's a good thing necessarily.
Well, you talk about a return to normal, but you could argue that many Americans don't want the return to what DC considers normal national security foreign policy, that Americans are not happy with the things that the US does and what it focuses on abroad. You could attribute Trump's rise in 2016 to that dissatisfaction. Is that a fair comment?
There is a sense, generally speaking, after 19 years in Afghanistan, after 18 years after kind of the run up to the Iraq War and the fact that the United States is still in these places. We're in Syria. We're in a lot of countries, and I think that people are exhausted by that. They're rightly, in my view, they understand that the United States has extended itself well beyond where it should, particularly at a time when we're dealing with economic crises, we're dealing with a pandemic, and there's a lot of skepticism, I think, about sort of going back to the same kind of thinking and the same kind of folks that produced a lot of that foreign policy and a lot of what they perceive at this point to be foreign policy failures.
Derek, foreign policy analysts, including Jonathan Geyer at the American Prospect, have written about the so-called consultancy grift, that political advisors spend a significant chunk of their careers working on behalf of the companies which benefit from war, then go on to government posts, like cabinet positions, where they are determining policy, and sometimes which companies get multi-million-dollar contracts. Does that sound a bit shady to you, Derek?
Sure. I mean, I think it's quite concerning. The rise of the strategic consultancy has been a reaction, I think, to the simultaneous kind of demonization, in a sense, of lobbying. If we can go back to the Obama administration, there was a very sort of conscious effort to not to bring lobbyists into the administration, where Blinken and Flournoy and also Avril Haines, who's the designate for Director of National Intelligence, have been working for the last few years is in a place called West Exec Advisors, which Flournoy and Blinken founded after they left the Obama administration. What's problematic about West Exec to me is that its relationships seem to be very heavily in the defense contractor sector, and sort of helping defense contractors navigate the Pentagon contract awarding process, kind of advising those companies. They're very sort of opaque about who their clients are, and that's true of almost all of these firms. The perception, at least, is very heavily that this is a conflict of interest, and I would be surprised if that wasn't, what was going on. I don't have any, information that I could, sort of point a finger at anybody and say this is you're peddling influence. But certainly the relationship seems very much in that kind of along those lines, let's say.